This video is sponsored by ISL. This is Guildford Way in Coquitlam, British Columbia, and this might be one of the most important transportation safety improvement projects in Metro Vancouver right now. Not because it is the longest, not because it's the flashiest, but because it shows what a suburban arterial road can become when a city decides not to give up at the intersection and that every mode of transportation deserves flow and safety, transforming pretty typical high-risk intersections to those that eliminate risk almost entirely, and from painted lanes on a high-speed corridor to separated lanes that might make you forget you're in Canada. To learn the secret sauce of this project, I met up with Coquitlam City Councillor Matt Johnlick, Coquitlam's Transportation Director Doug McLeod, and Scott McDonald, a sustainable transportation planner with ISL, a multidisciplinary engineering firm in Western Canada and a leader in the planning and design of active transportation infrastructure. ISL has supported the city of Coquitlam providing design services for the Guildford Way complete street improvements. The result is an award-winning modern design that shows what is possible when engineers, planners, city staff, council, and the community take safety seriously. So today we're going to look at what changed on Guildford Way, how these protected intersections work, and why it is so important to never give up at the intersection. Located just a SkyTrain ride away from Vancouver is Coquitlam, one of the fastest growing cities in the region. What was once a bedroom community has now become a real urban hub. But like many suburban cities, a lot of Coquitlam was built around wide, arterial roads. These roads were designed to move cars efficiently, but they often made walking, biking, and rolling feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Guildford Way is one of those important corridors, with around 24,000 residents living within 400 meters. And that is a huge number of people who could benefit from a safer, more comfortable street, especially when you consider at least 1/3 of Coquitlam's population don't drive. Guildford Way used to be the kind of road that many people would avoid on a bike. There were painted lanes, but they sat right beside fast, high-volume traffic. Technically, yes, you had a space to ride, but for most people, it did not feel like a place you would choose to put yourself. But now this 2.2-kilometer corridor has been transformed into a complete street, delivered in 2 phases, with the first completed in 2023, using quick-build infrastructure for about 1.5 kilometers from the Port Moody border to Johnson Street, and the second, completed in 2025, rebuilt the next 700 meters from Johnson Street to Pinetree Way, with a more permanent design. There are separated bike lanes, wider sidewalks, improvements for the visually impaired or people using mobility aids, beautiful bus stops, protected intersections, and new signals to prevent or reduce conflict, all while not compromising on vehicle flow. We will certainly talk about the bike lanes along the corridor. They are incredible, but I'd like to work backwards, starting at the biggest winner of these changes, this intersection right here in front of Coquitlam City Hall, where Guildford and Pinetree Way meet. Between 2020 and 2024, it saw over 150 crashes, with one particularly harrowing incident.
A couple of years ago, there was a woman crossing one of the crosswalks, and she got hit by a car turning left. That was a hit and run, and then as she was in the crosswalk after she got hit again by a different driver turning left, and then also a hit and run. So it was like a double hit and run.
It was the type of incident engineers and planners wanted to eliminate. And after the changes, it went from a very typical wide arterial intersection to a spot whose improvements have reduced high-risk interactions by 99.4%. Yes, 99.4%. More traffic does not have to equal more crashes. This has been achieved through a bevy of treatments creating layers of safety, kind of like an onion of safety. Let's peel back those layers and compare them to what was replaced.
The Guildford Way and Pinetree Way intersection was one of your very classic intersections where it had kind of standard crosswalk widths. One leg was a shared multi-use pathway crossing, and unfortunately a very high-speed channelized right turn, which was definitely part of some of the issues of needed to be fixed at the intersection.
The first layer here is protecting the intersections, and this is massive for people walking or rolling and is something you may be familiar with if you've been to the Netherlands or may have seen them in a few places around North America as they are starting to become more common.
What I usually describe it as providing space for all of the different users, particularly for people walking and using bikes, to give them more space at the intersections so that they can be seen by drivers and make it easier and more comfortable, then to actually separate out the users. When you actually have to go and cross the street and interact, you each have your own separated space so that you're making turning movements and crossing movements separate both from vehicles and each other.
This is huge when it comes to not only making spaces feel safe, but actually making them safe. And the point of this video, not giving up at the intersection. Instead of having a bike lane sandwiched between a through lane and a right turn lane that is easily crossed by drivers, now the only place for conflict should be a small spot at the intersection.
One of the most fascinating things is the signal operations is really where we did a lot of the big changes. So the left turn movements are now only protected, so you get your own phase to turn left rather than getting an arrow and then finding a gap in traffic, because that gap in traffic and that permitted movement was where we were seeing a lot of the conflicts occurring at the intersection.
This is where a huge amount of improvements were found. Separating left turn movements have led to a 93% reduction in conflicts with vulnerable road users and a 99.6% reduction in left turn high-risk conflict. As a driver, you no longer have to navigate through multiple lanes of traffic, cyclists, and pedestrians to make a left turn safely. All you have to do is follow your own signal.
The other big thing is we've now restricted right turns on red, so that if there's a red turn, you're not allowed to go. But instead, you go on a green movement, and you can also get your own green arrow when there's the opposing left that's happened. So you don't actually have to conflict with left turns. So you still get an opportunity for more green time, so to speak, when you're a right turn vehicle.
This is not just a measure to keep people walking and cycling safe. This is safer for everyone, including drivers. A big part of that change was on the northwest corner, which used to have a channelized right turn lane.
And finally, the last fun and what thing I like the most about it is you get this thing called leading pedestrian and leading bike interval, so that when it does go green, the bike signal and the walk signal goes on first, so that you get to go out and be seen in the intersection before vehicles get to move. So it just adds that extra level of safety. And all those things combined together is how Guildford and Pinetree now work.
It's now intuitive to navigate, which largely eliminates one of the main causes of collisions: human error. The only time there should be any conflict at all is during a green phase, where right-turning drivers are to cross the bike and pedestrian crossings. But like Doug mentioned, only after they have had the chance to get into the intersection by way of the leading interval. And one extra detail about bike signals is that they aren't just for the benefit of cyclists.
Having a bicycle signal, what it enables you to do is somebody on a bike, I can push the button, I get my green, and then if there's not a pedestrian that's also pushed the button, my bike signal can end several seconds earlier than it otherwise would have if there was a pedestrian phase as well. Because the minimum time to get a pedestrian across an intersection is a lot longer than it is for a bike to sail through an intersection. So a bike signal lets you get the bike through, and if there's no pedestrians, then we can start getting other people moving again faster. So it helps kind of get people moving without having to kind of waste people's time.
Moving on west along the second phase of the project, we get to experience the incredible difference to what came before. There is a great side-by-side on the Rolling in the City YouTube channel you should check out, where there was nothing more than paint separating somebody on a bike from the rest of traffic. Having that extra curb makes a massive difference in comfort, resulting in an experience that reminds me of pedaling around the Netherlands. Here it is beside a bike lane in The Hague. Red asphalt aside, you'd be hard-pressed to find a difference. The bike lane and sidewalk are separated from each other with a small mountable curb. That might not sound exciting, but it solves a lot of problems. It helps both people walking and cycling understand which space is for them, and is more forgiving if you were to ride close to or over it, hence the name mountable curb. You won't catch a pedal here. But it also solves another issue some might not consider.
The problem there is that it creates a bit of a gully where all your drainage pools. So one thing that we did was put in these curbs that take the drainage and direct them to some trench drains, and that deals with our drainage problem.
Along the way, you'll also get to see the transformation of the bus stops.
Before, you had people biking having to kind of jut out into traffic and get around the bus. Whereas here, everyone kind of slows down, and those interactions between users still happen, but they happen at slow speeds. And it's between pedestrians and people biking versus people driving 50 plus kilometers an hour and people trying to just get to school.
You'll also come across two more protected intersections, smaller than Guildford and Pinetree, one of which is three-legged, where the side street is minor. This has the added benefit of allowing cyclists to continue through without being stopped at a red light unnecessarily. And once you hit the next intersection at Johnson is where the second phase meets the first.
The longer bit of the project is the quick build section, and it kind of speaks to the beauty of quick build bike lanes is that you can get them in fast, you can get them in cheap. And the time to design those projects are also a lot shorter. It's not just the construction time. Once you get to kind of these sections that are raised, they're beautiful, protected intersections, but the cost of that is a lot more, and the design and construction times are a lot more than quick build bike lanes. So what you tend to see is a lot of jurisdictions now are installing these quick build bike lanes and then over time improving them because they can get a lot of the safety benefit right away, and then over time they can start to perfect things.
It might seem like a step down from the second phase, and in a way it literally is, but it's also a massive improvement to what came before. And you don't need a time machine to experience what it might have been like. Just continue down to the border of Port Moody and you can see exactly what it was like. There are plans to improve this corridor, which are coming soon, but until they arrive, you'll only find paint on the side of the road to separate someone on a bike from traffic. That extra bit of protection goes a long way, inviting people who would otherwise never ride without it. And as you go back to where we started, you can feel your own stress levels fall as you go from painted lanes to curb and flex post protection to grade-separated bike lanes that would be fit for a Dutch city. But all of this adds up to more than just a bike lane project. They create a complete street that works for everyone.
Like it accommodates obviously people driving, large industrial traffic. It accommodates people biking now. It has transit buses coming up and down the corridor, and then obviously people walking to and from those transit stops and different destinations. So it is serving all these different modes and is serving them all pretty safely as well.
You know, I've even got compliments from bus drivers saying it's better for them to now navigate through that because it's less complex. From what started off as a let's protect micromobility users, we ended up with a benefit to all users at this intersection.
You don't just see this in the data with the safety improvements. Many residents have been vocal about the success of these changes.
I had my own neighbors that were asking me questions about it, concerned about loss of potential road width, about how much the lane would actually be getting used. And since it's been made, I've heard nothing but positive things. I see people taking their bikes going down Guildford now, and what they're telling me is they feel so much safer in a protected lane versus being on Guildford. And more I'm hearing from residents who are wanting to take their bike, they're using their scooter, they're trying not to have to rely on having too many cars. And we know one of the best ways to solve traffic is to give people a safe option to be able to use micromobility to get to where they want to go.
But this is just the start. As amazing as this corridor has become, the connections are still few and far between, often leading to a shared multi-use path or a high-speed lane for traffic.
It makes a ton of sense to be putting our micromobility lanes here, but we also need to make sure that we are building out the network. So looking at those areas where we know we have the road width, we know cyclists are using it, because as time goes on, we need that network to continue to grow and to be able to connect. So people are able to take longer and longer trips and feel safe while doing so.
There is construction of new bike paths and intersections happening right now to broaden a network that is only going to improve as the years go by. But one of the biggest wins here is not just what this project means for Coquitlam, but what it can teach other cities about what is possible on their own streets.
My suggestions for other cities as well is to find ways to make it more about transportation improvements, right? That our approach of adding road safety elements and some actual benefits and users for vehicles. We lengthened some of the left turn bays while we were doing this project. Those type of things really make that entire aspect of the project feel like it's a benefit to everyone and all users, right?
We've shown it works. Coquitlam is a suburban community still, and we know that in every community, doesn't matter if you're rural, suburban, or urban, there are people who want to ride their bikes. There are people who want to be able to get around without necessarily using a car because they might feel about whether it's the cost of living, whether it's about just physical exercise, or just wanting to be outside and being able to take your bike around, not have to deal with parking. It's a boon for businesses, it's a boon for getting more transit, and it's about creating a community that is more complete. And I guarantee that every community has a spot in their city where a micromobility lane might work. Try it, and I have been surprised by the amount of residents, when they've tried their bike for the first time on the route, they love it. They appreciate it. They want to have that option more and more. If Coquitlam can make it work, I know all communities can.
Guildford Way is a major step forward. It is the first protected intersection design of its kind in the Tri-Cities region, which has won recognition from Hub Cycling. ITE Greater Vancouver was a finalist for a Transportation Association of Canada Active Transportation Achievement Award, and just recognized by the Institute of Transportation Engineers Canada as the best complete street project in Canada, and soon, possibly North America. Most importantly, it gives people a real example that they can point to. When somebody says this would never work in a suburban city, you can point to Coquitlam. When somebody says protected intersections are too complicated, you can point to Guildford and Pinetree. When somebody says bike lanes will ruin traffic, you can point to projects that improve safety while maintaining vehicle capacity. And when somebody says people will not use it, you can point to the growing micromobility activity along this corridor. Guildford Way shows that safer streets are possible. Better suburban arterials are possible. And if this can happen here beside City Hall at one of the busiest intersections in Coquitlam, then it can happen in a lot more places too. The real lesson is that safety cannot stop at the curb, the crosswalk, or the bike lane. It has to carry through the place where people are most exposed. So when building better streets, just remember, don't give up at the intersection.